everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, Introduction to Torq, IAM Automation. There'll be time towards the end of today's webinar, so please enter your questions into the Q&A tab and our team will respond during the allotted time. I'm pleased to introduce you to our speaker today, Patrick Maddox, our Senior Director of Field Engineering here at Torq. Thank you so much, Patrick, and take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the intro, Christopher. As Christopher mentioned, my name is Patrick Maddox, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about Torq and how some of our customers use Torq to automate responses to IAM alerts. Through this webinar, we're going to be building a quick example that shows how easily you can build workflows in Torq to respond to this type of alert. But before I get into it, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what Torq is. Torq is really an automation platform built for security operators. It is focused on no code, gives you the ability to build scenarios and workflows without being an expert in coding, without having to write a ton of Python, without having to invest a lot in learning a new set of languages. But it also allows you to do this without having to abandon tools you've already made investments in. The reason we built the platform is there's just more every day for security teams. There's more alerts, there's more change, there's more attacks, and it increases every single day. In talking to customers, we often find they're torn between responding to the repetitive things and working on sort of critical incidents or the really dangerous things that are happening across their infrastructures. This isn't necessarily a new problem, but traditional SOAR platforms tended to be reactive, require a ton of investment in coding, be very cumbersome to accomplish even very basic things. And Torq is really the opposite of that. Primarily, we're purpose-built for security. Our customers use us to reduce alert fatigue, to remediate and respond faster to events, to deliver proactive security to their entire customer base, internal or external. We do this by including thousands of pre-built steps for a variety of different security use cases. Things as simple as isolating a security endpoint, calling a REST API, enriching threats automatically. We'll walk through some of those scenarios. You'll see sort of how this works in the Torq platform. At a high level, we see a couple of themes across our customers. They use us for the IAM case we're going to be discussing today, but they also use us for things like responding to email phishing, remediating their cloud posture, dealing with suspicious user activity, doing some threat intelligence enrichment. While we're going to focus on the IAM use case, I think you'll see how you can use Torq for these other use cases as well. Before I dive into it, I want to sort of cover some basics about Torq. Torq is a SaaS platform. And the easiest way to think about the components of Torq is to look at how you would respond to a security event. And I'll sort of march you through the architecture. So typically when we think about the architecture, we're talking about where an event comes from, sort of what is the thing that's going to trigger a workflow that you'll be build in Torq. We're going to do this inside of Torq as we go through the demo. That's typically ingested via an ingress, and then we make decisions about what workflow will fire in response to the characteristics of that event. That's done via the flows engine. Now, the flows engine has a couple decisions to make. It can go pull in data from other integration sources. Maybe it's send you a message on Slack or isolate an endpoint or suspend a user in Okta. But it can also decide to execute these steps, these individual integrations, and combine them, as well as do that with an on-premise component we call a step runner. So you have primarily a SaaS platform, but we often find there's customers who would never want to open up an internal service to a third party. And so we do have a local component that can handle those situations. Torq is secure and compliant. That's what we're built off of. It's why customers trust us. We're SOC 2 Type 2, GDPR, ISO 27001, HIPAA compliant. It's why our customers trust us. It's the security in our DNA. With that said, let's go ahead and jump over to the demo. Now, if you bear with me for 1 second while I share my screen over in the right window, we'll get started. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen again. And what we're looking at right now is the Torq interface. We call this the designer. It's where workflows that I discussed previously are primarily built. And in our example, we are building an IAM workflow. So what we're going to do is first define how that event from Okta, in this case, comes in. If you look at the big lightning bolt centered on your screen, you can see that it is where you define a trigger. Now, a trigger in this case could be a variety of different sources, but for us, it's going to be Okta. And we're going to go pull in an event that already came into us from Okta. We can see the event log. So we can go ahead and look at these events that have come in. We can, of course, make it larger. You can see the full payload of that event. We're actually going to use details of that payload when we build the workflow and response further down. But let's go ahead and define a set of conditions when this event will fire. When we define a set of conditions, what I want to do is go ahead and look at the context of that event come in. And as we looked at the event log, we saw a raw JSON payload. We actually do some really nice things in terms of formatting it and letting you sort of look at that event in a tree form. If I go to the debug context here, for this particular event, we're going to be working off of a super administrator being promoted. Whenever the privilege granted equals super administrator, we want this workflow to fire. Super administrator promotions should be really rare. They should get another set of eyes on them. They're also sort of the keys to the castle for your IAM infrastructure. So we've built this event, this trigger. Let's go ahead and build a set of steps to respond to it. Now, I have a bunch of different options. If you look over at the steps menu here, you can see we integrate with hundreds of different providers with thousands of individual steps. Steps are the sort of atomic element that allows you to do something. So if I were to say, when the super administrator event fires, I want to have, no matter what, I want to send a message to Slack. And so I type Slack into the search bar. And now I can build a message to be sent based on the context of that event. So whenever that event fires, it's going to go ahead and send in a message to Slack. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and name this. We'll just do the Okta IAM demo. All right, let's go ahead and save this real quick. So our work is saved. When we send a message, I can send it to a recipient based on the event, but I can also go ahead and send it to my SecOps channel. Whenever this event comes in, I want to send a message, and I'm going to now use characteristics of this event to build this message over to my SecOps channel. So I'm going to again select from tree mode, and let's go ahead and say a super administrator was, let's say this, a user was a user. Say who the user is, select from tree mode, event, the target. In this case, this particular user was, of course, you get to see all my typos. I can also say who did the promotion. So again, we can go ahead and refer back to that event about who did the promotion. Now, I can type ahead. I can also, for me, I like working off of the particular tree mode when it comes to building these workflows. So now I've built my first step, and I can, of course, test this step atomically. I'm going to build a whole bunch more steps down here, but I can go ahead and see this step fire and get data back from it. Now, I went ahead and fired this off. If we go ahead and look over, we can see that message that happened in real time. A user, Bob, never give admin user, was promoted, with my typo, to super admin by the user Patnat. And that happens to be my user for this demo. If we go back and look at that, we can go ahead and build some other steps in here. So maybe we didn't want to build just a message. Maybe we want to ask whoever did the promotion whether they intended to. So let's go ahead and pull out another Slack message, and let's go ahead and say, ask a question. We'll go ahead and ask the promoter, the sort of admin who promoted someone else to admin, the actor, in this case myself, did you mean to promote the target, Bob, and we can give a couple of options here. And now I've sort of built an interactive message to Slack as an example. Go ahead and save it, and let's go ahead and fire this one off. And again, we can go back here, and what we will see is Torq asking me a question and prompting me so I can respond to it. Did you mean to promote Bob to super admin? No, I didn't. I didn't mean to promote Bob. That's probably a problem. Now, in this particular example, that was a real-time example, but maybe I'm not at my computer. So one of the things all of our out-of-the-box steps include is additional parameters for the very basics you would need. So I can go ahead and add additional parameters to this. I can add a timeout. I can add a default response. And now I've got a path that will happen if I don't happen to respond to the message within a given time. But let's go ahead and say, if the answer for that question I asked on Slack was, I can go ahead and pull in the results from a previously run step. If the response was no, let's go ahead and take another set of actions. Maybe I want to start doing some intel gathering on this. So I want to pull in another set of tools I use. Maybe I want to pull in VirusTotal and ask VirusTotal to run a set of assessments against the IP address where this initial event was triggered from. And I have all that information from the event, and I can again run this in real time and say, let's go ahead and feed that IP address in from the client who made the change to Okta into VirusTotal, and again, tested atomically. And now I can get reputation data from VirusTotal about the actor associated with this event. Of course, if we make this bigger, we can see all the different engines that VirusTotal uses to make an assessment. We can also use that summary down at the bottom to take further actions. But we're just in the phase of gathering some basic information. Maybe I want to go ahead, and the first thing I want to do is, whenever there's any question about this, suspend the user in Okta. Because it's not just about gathering information, it's about taking action against your infrastructure. So we're going to go ahead and suspend Bob so he can't do anything if for some reason I didn't respond, or just sort of define a default safe position. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and specify by type ahead or click ahead Bob's ID. And now we can run this and suspend Bob from our IAM. It's a very basic workflow of how you can start gathering some information. But we've got this IP information that we gathered here. Let's go ahead and build another if condition and say, you know what, if this client came back, the admin came back as malicious or suspicious through the analysis that VirusTotal is going to do, we can go ahead and build a set of responses using the data that comes back from VirusTotal and say, you know what, if it comes back, that IP comes back as malicious, let us go ahead and suspend the admin as well. And so we'll say, we won't say equals, but we want to say if like more than 3 of the analysis engines in VirusTotal came back as malicious, or we know, myself, Patrick, only works out of a specific region, I could specify, hey, if you see any of these actions outside of a US region, go ahead and suspend the user. So you can start building some reasonably reasonable flows with these if statements. What I want to do next is go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to suspend the admin user, but we're also going to take some actions across our EDR system. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and look at what I have available through an EDR. And what I want to do is probably create a blacklist item for that IP address. And the way this works is this particular EDR provider uses a hash, and we can use not only the built-in steps, but we can change some of the information to feed into other tools. So, I was working with an IP address, but my EDR wants a hash of that to go ahead and do some blocking on the endpoints. Well, I can go ahead and transform that IP address into something that my EDR here can consume. And when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and select from tree mode again. We're going to take what we want to block. We want to block the IP address. And we can go ahead and calculate the hash for it with an out-of-the-box step, and then feed that data in. This again, all happening in real time. Now I've got the SHA-1. I can go ahead and take the SHA-1 and pass it in by selecting that calculate SHA-1 step into, in this case, Sentinel-1 to automatically update and block. And I can, of course, also update my sites and have it apply specifically just using out-of-the-box steps. Now, we're talking a little bit about out-of-the-box steps. Of course, there's the additional parameters available. You can sort of add a description. But let's say for some reason, we don't have the sort of API you want to access with a third party. So, we've got this suspend user here. If we switch to HTTP mode, I can extend the out-of-the-box step that we're providing. And let's say Okta is providing some new capability via a V2 API. This one hits the V1 API. I can convert any of the steps to the raw API call, and then update the description of them, and then save them for reuse anywhere across my infrastructure. So, we've named the step suspend user. I can say the suspend user V2 API. I've made the change down there, and then go ahead and save it as a custom step. And if I go over here and look at my custom steps, and we'll just make this easy, I'll type V2 API. That suspend user V2 API is now available not only to this workflow, but any other workflow that I may build. Now, there's a bunch of other controls that I haven't spent a lot of time on, talking about loops, being able to embed other workflows and the data they combine and sort of into this workflow. So, I could add a sub workflow and choose one of my other workflows and bring that data in so it's composable and repeatable. The last thing I want to talk about, just keeping a quick eye on the time, is how you can use this designer to add additional context. So we started out with this Okta event. We said, send a message here, but let's say, what is this actually doing? This is notify the SecOps channel, right? With my typos built in. So I can add even additional context to each one of these steps. So instead of this just being an if, if the admin response is no, I now have additional context. And this makes it very easy for users to look at work that other people on their team have created and go ahead and understand the context by which they're created and understand the logical flow. You've got all of these things built in. You can attest them atomically. You can build these workflows to automatically respond to events. You can also, if we go back to the very first part of this, start talking about different types of triggers that you can do. So I built this off of Okta. I can also build a flow that could be scheduled, that could be invoked manually, that can be invoked by a variety of tools. So I can create a generic flow that responds to events from any number of different event sources. Now, I know you've given me 20 minutes. Christopher, I wanted to check in, just do a quick time check. Were there any questions from the folks attending the webinar that I could help answer?
Yeah, Patrick, I do have a few questions come in, and everyone attending, please feel welcome to continue to add questions into the Q&A tab, and we'll get to those shortly. The first question I have is, what level of coding skills would be required to build workflows?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really great question, and hopefully kind of what I showed you sort of helps you understand that. The reason we have the designer is because we don't want you to have a really in-depth level of coding in order to get some results in terms of automation. So everything is basically drag and drop or click ahead. You don't have to have a lot of coding available, although I will say that we do a bunch of really nice things to make it easy for you to take advantage of the data that's already in systems that you're using through utilities that are also included. So let's say you wanted to say, let's go ahead and grab all the IPv4 addresses from a particular thing. Well, I don't have to be a coding expert to do that. I don't have to write a bunch of regex in order to understand how to get this data out of things I already have access to. It's a great question. Are there any others, Christopher?
Yes, I have one here. How would you make a Torq workflow portable? Is there version control?
Yeah. That is a very common question. So, we say Torq is no code. The act of automating is not sort of code driven, but everything, of course, behind here is. Torq workflows are ultimately version controlled, portable. You can export them, you can import them. The easiest way to access that is through this little 3-dot icon up here, and you can export them as YAML. And that makes them incredibly portable, parameterized, very, very reusable. It's a great question.
And then next up, I have a question regarding integrations. How much time and resources would be required to set up integrations here?
It's another really great question. So you can see we have, a couple hundred vendors out of the box. Some of them have multiple tens of sort of common steps we see. As I sort of went through this example, you can extend it any way you would like, but let's say we don't support an integration with a particular vendor. I think one of the things that is kind of tough for folks is whenever you say integration, you think of this big heavyweight process and you need to go find a developer and you need to devote all this time. It's really not the case with us. We include some out-of-the-box steps that allow you to build integrations if for some reason we do not cover a particular vendor, or maybe it's a private API you would never expose. You can go ahead and use these to use this step as an example to build any set of integrations you would like using basic HTTP calls, and then save them as custom steps. I've got a variety of different custom steps here, simple Giphy lookup, scanning a single file. These are all integrations that weren't out of the box that I went ahead and built in response to a particular need. And it was as simple as just calling a URL and passing in the right parameters. It's not a heavyweight integration, and it's just as easy to save them and export them. Hopefully that helped answer that question. Of course, there's also a variety of tools also in the platform, things like running Python scripts or Bash or SSH. You've got a huge variety of tools to interface with a different set of systems on their level.
Great, thank you, Patrick. I think that's it. That's all I have for questions today. Do you have any closing remarks?
I just want to thank everybody for the time. Of course, it's always a pleasure to talk about this and to hear what people are interested in and to get some questions. If you ever have need any other information, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you'd like to receive a personalized demo of Torq, head on over to torq.io and click Get Started. Thank you so much, Patrick. Really appreciate
Thanks, everybody.
Today.